Welcome to another episode of Live from the Wish House with me, Chris Spinner. If you're a regular, welcome back. And if it's your first time, I'm so happy you're joining us. My path profoundly changed when my son was diagnosed with autism. My marriage collapsed, and I began to develop my own Cris-losophies to navigate and thrive. I'm here to connect with you to share and learn, and together we can open our minds to creating the life you love to live. So please subscribe, like, share, and most importantly, comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts, feelings, and stories. Relationships, an age-old topic of conversation. Thousands and thousands of books, songs, poems, movies, stories, all dealing with that one word, relationships. And today, I'm going to attempt to carve out a little piece of the conversation for myself and ultimately for you as I shed some Cris-losophy on relationships. And while I'm confident enough to believe my conversations, my ideas, the things that I've learned through living my life are good food for thought for just about anyone, I admit I tend to lean into the woman's audience. So with this episode, ladies, this is primarily for you. So let's take a good close look at intimate relationships, romantic relationships, whatever you'd like to call them. Why do we want them? Do we want them? Are we pursuing them? Are we allowing them to flow naturally? Are we upset if we don't have one? Are we maybe not so upset but feeling like we should be upset? Are there outside pressures, or are we the pressurers for ourselves or for a younger generation? Have we romanticized relationships to the point where we really believe relationship is a fairy story? There are so many questions and my open-minded, controversial opinions. So let's dive in. I just got through binging or re-watching the TV show Mad Men. It was on TV from 2007 to 2015. The show itself takes place in the early 60s on through the 70s, and it chronicles the lives of the advertising men of the day during the 1960s and the early 70s. It was really acclaimed for its historical detail, but it was really famous for showing the cultural shifts during that era. When I watched it as a weekly series, I was in my late 40s into my 50s. Now I'm in my late 60s. And boy, rewatching it at this age, it took on a whole new life. In fact, it reminded me when I was a kid, there was a commercial for Virginia Slim's cigarettes, and the jingle said, "You've come a long way, baby, to get where you got to today." And it made me think, have we come a long way, baby? I mean, you don't realize how different things were in those days. I grew up right in that time capsule. I was a kid in the 60s and I came of age in the 70s. And I remember the women's liberation movement, as we called it then. I remember coming of age as that was happening. I remember that my mom was not about that. She was a pretty conservative thinker, as I've mentioned before. She came from an Italian family, first generation, very Catholic. Her idea of being a woman was to find a husband, to raise a family, and to do a good job in structuring that life so that it could give into the community, which is a noble thing. Having lived through that and then watching that show at the same time I'm planning on speaking about this during my podcast was an eye-opener, because seeing the cultural shifts in Mad Men brought it all back to me. I mean, women had rights, but I must tell you, it almost felt like they had minimal amount of rights. You couldn't buy a house. You couldn't get a divorce easily. If you were in a marriage or you were not happy, there's a line where one of the characters, not going to spoil it just in case, one of the characters is looking to get a divorce and the lawyer tells her, yeah, it's the hardest thing to do. The actual quote was, I guess in New York State, they don't want you to get a divorce. She had to uproot her family and move to Reno, where in those days, for some reason or another, it was easier to get the process moving. You could not get information from your doctor if you had a serious illness one-on-one with your doctor. The doctor would call in your husband or the male figure in your family to talk about your prognosis and what could be done about it. And all of those topics are visited in Mad Men. There's a scene where this woman is terminally ill and the doctor asks for her husband, and they're in the office, and the wife is off to the side while the husband is asking all of the questions, and all of the decisions are being discussed only with the man. It's so interesting because I remember seeing those scenes in my 40s, and it just could have been because I was in the middle of raising my son, or I wasn't concentrating as hard as I was this time around. Watching it episode to episode, you get a very different feel. But watching it this time and seeing that, it was like, what do they say? You get slapped upside the head. And I thought, that is my lifetime. Women didn't have credit cards. That is my lifetime. I couldn't believe the double standard when it came to women in general, women in society. It was exactly the way my mother had subtly and not so subtly informed us as women, that's what our job was going to be. My mom wanted me to go to college and spoke about higher education when I was in my teens, but her whole focus really was on eventually me finding a husband and following the same path that she did. And watching her, my mother lived a long time, to 95. I noticed as she aged, she became very married to those values. There was a portion of my mother's life where she wanted to strive for more, but she didn't have the skill set to do it. The pressures from society, the pressures from her family, the pressures from what she believed, a default belief in her own head, prevented her at the age she was from going back to school, from achieving what she wanted to achieve. We all say in my family, my mom would have been an excellent teacher. She loved to teach. In fact, she did teach out of our recreation program, a pre-K, for many years when she was a little older. I think that's what she would have wanted to do. She would have wanted to find a career and affect society with her other talents, with her other gifts, outside of being a wife and a mom. Looking back at my mom's life, I see frustrations in there. She was a great mom. She gets double thumbs up for many of the things that she did. You know me, I'm the great dissector. I dissect everything that I was taught. I dissect every portion of my journey. And I could sit and do an entire episode on what was great about the way my mom raised us and what wasn't so great. And I've gotten to the point where the stuff that wasn't so great isn't a blame. It's not a fault. It's just she didn't have the skill set. She didn't have the mindset. She wasn't coming of age or moving through adulthood during a time where the kind of ideas that I have now were almost accepted. But she missed that whole arc of doing more. And as she got older, she was very vehemently holding on to those ideas of having a family, finding a husband, contributing to society in those ways. She would say that to my nieces all the time. She would often say, those were the best days of my life. But I don't think they were. Doesn't mean she didn't love us, but I think she wanted more and didn't know how to access it. So when I watched the show, once again, it reminded me of that double standard. Women were supposed to do this, and men had an open field to do anything they wanted. They could be brave. They could take risks. They can change jobs. Of course, there's all sorts of scandal in the show, and that's not what I'm talking about. But it was such a different world, especially if you were a woman, a single woman who wanted a career and who was striving in business. It was an unbelievable thing to see how these women had to navigate through a whole other mindset when it came to men and the power structure and the patriarchy as we know it today. But we were just starting to find that out back in those days. So watching this show, revisiting this, brought so many new thoughts into my mind and pushed into what I wanted to say today in this episode about relationships. And you know what I'm kind of finding out? We are still very relationship oriented in this society. I think it's because my generation, the generations that is now in the ages of 60s and 70s and on to 80s, we still have a stronghold on the younger generation. We've raised our children, we've raised our daughters, and now those daughters are of age, if not already married, if not already with children. Many of us have grandchildren that are on their way into these new found experiences. And so we still have the stronghold and we are still on the fence. Some of us really were a little more liberal in thought and moved forward in a different direction, but many of us were not. It was easier to fall into the default of how we were raised. But we're still a relationship-oriented society. And for women, I'm not so sure that's a great thing. As I said before, here comes some of my controversial, or as my mom would say, you're out there, she used to say to me. You're out there. Your thoughts are out there. She would also say often, not everybody thinks like you, to which I would reply, that's not a good thing. Everybody should think like me. And here's why. We're so relationship oriented. We start when our children are little. I think I've mentioned this before, but it bears repeating. We start this when our children are infants or toddlers. Do you know how many times I've seen little boys walking around with shirts that say lady killer on them? How are you a lady killer when you're 2? But it's already being established, the kind of persona we want. Here comes the macho guy. He's going to be so handsome. All the ladies are going to be falling in the street when he gets older. How many times do we see well-meaning people say, oh my God, your daughter is so beautiful. You're going to have to barricade the door from the boys when she gets older. No one ever says things like, look at your daughter, how adorable. I bet you're wondering if she's going to be a doctor or a lawyer or an actor. I bet you're wondering if she's going to have a sense of style and be able to sew and create. Nobody says that. The first thing they say is you're going to barricade the door from the lady killer. How many times are you sitting by the pool and there are 2 babies, people's grandchildren, a little boy and a little girl, and she already has a boyfriend. She already has a boyfriend. These children can't even speak, but we've already put our labels on them. We aren't even evolved enough to concede that there's a possibility that the person isn't heterosexual. We're very much in the old school thinking. The kids get older. I watch it all of the time. We meet someone, we see someone, our cousin's younger daughter, our next door neighbor. We ask, how are you? How's everything? Do you have a boyfriend? First question we ask when a young lady is 14, 15. We do it to the boys too, but we really do it to the girls. Do you have a boyfriend? We show such pleasure in coupling our children very early on. Now that was very commonplace in the 60s and 70s. Girls got partners early and they married early. When I was a child, my much older cousin was married at age, he was 20, she was 19. I cannot tell you how enamored I was with this whole situation. I was enamored to the point of, I was wishing that I could have that experience as well. Now when I look back, and by the way, not to air the family laundry, but that marriage didn't make it. But they went a long time. They had 2 beautiful children. Everybody gets along. Everybody's remarried. Life has moved on. But I remember when the divorce occurred, everybody in the family was up in arms. But why? That girl was 19 years old. Back in the day, that was considered all set to take on an adult role, which meant children and a family. But how much more did she and how much more could all of us accomplish by seeing a relationship as fitting into a different pocket in our life than a goal. We want more than simply to be in this column. And we should be encouraging our kids to want more. We shouldn't be so cheerleading when they come home early with the thoughts of having a boyfriend or a girlfriend. I had a friend once that actually said that her daughter was 16 and she had a nice boyfriend. And they said, we're very lucky. I'll never forget that. We're very lucky. I think what they meant was it was a nice boy and they were happy to have the boy come over and visit. But we're very lucky at age 16 seemed so strange to me. Lucky for what? It's hard. You have children, you have daughters, they want to find a partner, they're watching TV, they have natural feelings of partnering with someone. I think the best idea is to early on get everybody involved in lots of activities that will encourage them to have other thoughts beyond having that partner. I think that having the partner isn't a goal. It's kind of something you pick up along the way. And what I mean by that is it's not a goal to get a boyfriend. It's not a goal to get a girlfriend. It's not a goal to have a partner. It's a goal to nurture your mind, to open your mind, to decide what it is your purpose is here on the planet and go after that and spend time doing that. And along the way, you'll attract the right person if you have the right mindset. But we don't encourage that as much as we think we do. I have friends my own age that are upset that their daughters haven't found partners yet. I have friends my own age that constantly sprinkle the conversations around their daughters with, I can't wait to have grandchildren. Who's going to be having those children? Not going to be the moms. It's going to be the daughters. Do you know that your daughter wants to have children? Do you know that your daughter wants to have more than one child? There's so many options in this evolved society today. Do you know that your daughter wants to have a partner to have children? Have you ever thought that maybe your daughter would want to be a mom to affect someone's life through an adoption or through another way to have children? We don't have those conversations because somehow we're still married to these old school ideas, which I think put a barrier up instead of coming to the forefront and saying to our daughters, what do you want? What are you experiencing? We carry on over engagements to the point that I have to laugh. I'm not cynical and I'm not anti-love. I'm just a realistic person. And I think it would be great to find a partner, to attract a partner that you can match with and that you have things in common with and that you value each other's worth and that you're willing to try to walk through life together to establish a life that includes both people. I would love to see that happen, not only for me, even at this age, but for anyone. I would love to see that happen, but we're not giving the information about those kind of healthy relationships. We are encouraging by the celebrations we give to these moments. Go on social media and watch what moms do when their daughter becomes engaged. It's a carrying on. We carry on over engagements like it is the biggest thing that could ever happen, the most important thing. So if you're the daughter, you now feel that you've made the grade. If you're watching this, you're thinking, no matter what I do, I still have to achieve that portion of my life. Saying yes to the dress, my favorite thing. I mean, look, I've gone to a couple of my cousins' kids going to buy the bridal dress and we all bond and have family jokes and we're all drinking champagne. But we have a day, okay, set aside so that we can find a dress to wear at a wedding and then have your daughter hold a big sign up that says, I said yes to a dress. To me, it's an unrealistic portrayal on a long-term level. If you're going in to have a hell of a good time, drink some champagne, and talk about the big party you might be throwing, I guess that's one thing. But when we continue to celebrate these kind of smaller events that shouldn't be blown up into the bigger things that they are, it does discourage the gals from putting up on their social media. How about, I said yes to the degree. I said yes to 4 years of undergraduate, 2 years of graduate, and now I have my master's degree. I said yes to the doctorate. I said yes to the fact that now I'm an expert at analyzing children's reading patterns. I said yes to the fact that I've learned 5 languages. How come we don't have a sign held up for that? We're still back there. It's Mad Men mentality. We're going to watch that show and we're going to see, wow, I'm so glad I didn't live then. Wow, is that how it really was? That's our lifetime. It's our lifetime. And yes, that's exactly how it really was. There's 2 characters in the show. And at the end of the show, this gal, Peggy, who's had all sorts of different relationships. I love her character the best because she evolves. And that's something that I love to watch because I feel that my life has been an evolution. I started out wanting a straight path. I started out wanting, I speak about this when I talk about my son and how his autism changed my life. When I'm doing lectures, I begin all the time with the same story, that the life I have now is not the life I saw myself having. I started out as a young girl wanting what every other young girl in 1970, whatever, wanted. I wanted a husband. I wanted a house, split level, breezeway. I was very specific. 3 children, Sunday dinners, pool. That's what I thought I wanted. But instead, life threw me different detours, and I'm so grateful for it because I feel my life evolved. And when I look back and when I look forward, there's so many different versions of myself. And I think that's what my mom didn't have. She didn't have different versions of herself. And when we can keep our minds open and teach our daughters or model better yet to our daughters that you can evolve, that you can have different paths to go on. There's no time frame. There's no rules. You do it at your own pace. You take the mistakes. You take the risks. You walk bravely through them. When I watch this evolution of Peggy, in the end, she falls in love and doesn't even know she's in love. I just love this character. But she falls in love with somebody that she's been working with for years, and it's the man that professes his love to her first. But I love the relationship because they evolved together. It's exactly the way I feel. A relationship is something that you kind of bump into along the way. It's a happy little surprise, a happy big surprise, that when he tells her, I love you, I find myself not wanting to spend days without you, not wanting to see you after work. And it triggers her mind to realize she's feeling the same thing. She's walking the same walk. And in that moment, they realize in each other what they have. And what they have is a shared value system. They respect the other one's work. They respect the other one's whole personhood. One is not trying to please the other. They're just being themselves. And in that being of themselves, they then attract towards one another. That energy in each other's space is something they can't deny. So if you're writing the epilogue to this character arc, you wonder, I see them as a marriage that doesn't fall apart. I see them as a relationship that does go the long term, that does go the long road. Because I feel those are the kind of people that they're in it together. They just grabbed each other's hand and said, let's do this together now, officially. So I figure as they age and they have problems, they're going to be there for one another. Will they have children? Maybe, if you're writing your own epilogue to the series. Whatever happens, I feel like they're there for one another. They didn't just choose somebody because it was a goal. It's not a goal. We've made it a goal. We've made it an accomplishment. We have romanticized it when we know damn well it's not a fairy tale. That's Mad Men mentality. It's really kind of simple. It's 2 people deciding to walk through life together. Not easy. If you think about it, you're talking 40, maybe 40 plus years that you're committing to do. And then once you're in, everybody tells you how hard it is and how much work it takes. And you find yourself working at something that you made a goal and losing yourself at the same time. So you see, I'm not saying that relationships are going to make you lose yourself or tear you apart or something to be afraid of. No, I'm simply saying if you're working on yourself, if you're loving yourself, if we, the moms, the grandmoms, if we, the women in this community, are expressing that, are role modeling our own joy, our own contentment, if we're doing that, you're going to have a much better chance at influencing the next generation to find the right partner, rather to scramble for that goal to be met. There's nothing wrong with carving out what works for you. People are going to tell you, oh, you need to find somebody because you can't be alone. Who told you that? Who told you that you can't be alone? You can be alone. People say to me all the time, don't you want to meet someone so they can take care of you as you age? I laugh every time I hear that. What's to say the person that I'm going to connect with isn't going to become needy and need care, or maybe pass away before I do? My mom used to say that all the time, and I would jokingly say, it was dark humor, how's that working out for everyone in this family? Because all of the women in my family lost their husbands first. As I'm saying that, I'm recalling one did not. One did not. Out of 5 wives, my mother being the 6th, only one went before her husband. Everybody else was left alone. My sister-in-law left alone. So the younger generation too. I worked with 2 women who lost their husbands quite early in life. You can't marry someone or connect with someone or be looking for someone so that they can take care of you and so that you won't be alone. There's nothing wrong with being alone and making it on your own so that the right person attaches to you. You know, there's a very famous little video that Marlo Thomas made. And I tell the story all the time. I probably told it on another podcast, and I love this story. She said that when she was young, she grew up in a very big family, a very traditional family. And on Sundays, they would have the Sunday dinner. All of us from this generation can relate to that. And somehow the men ended up in one room, the kids were off playing somewhere, and the moms were always in the kitchen. So everybody is cooking, and then everyone is cleaning up. And during the cleanup time, the women would hang around and sit and stop and talk. And one of the things they would talk about is how hard they were having it at home. And as they would be talking about this, inevitably 1 or 2 women would say, but what am I going to do? Where am I going to go? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? And Marlo Thomas said that stuck in her head as a young girl. And she always thought, I'm always going to have somewhere to go. So when she grew up and became the star of the famous 60s TV sitcom, That Girl, she suggested, because they wanted her, she was a beautiful actress, and they wanted her to star in a sitcom, but she insisted and suggested that they do one where the girl was single. Let's follow the single girl trying to make it in the city. So if you know the sitcom, she was an actress, very funny, cute. I loved it. All of us from our age, we all wanted to be Anne Marie. That was her name. Her parents were always questing for her to marry her boyfriend. And she went through all the seasons without marrying her boyfriend, but having a partner. He respected her. She respected him. He saw her worth. She saw his worth. He respected who she was in society and didn't want her to change, and vice versa. And she said at the end of the series, the producers wanted her to get married. And she said, no, I don't want for young girls at home to think that the only happy ending is to get married. So the last episode, she was dragging her boyfriend, Donald, to a women's liberation meeting. She wanted it to be that everybody was happy in the end, but they didn't have to be married. Was she anti-marriage? Absolutely not. But she was centering herself. She was centering her partner. She was centering her life. She wasn't saying, this is a goal, so let's march down the aisle at the end of this. I'm starting to think that relationships and the way life moves really isn't all that serious. And what I mean by that is, I got through up to my age now, I'll be 68 in June. I got through twists and turns by simply opening myself up to it. And when I look back, I don't negate the hard parts. I don't negate the evenings I was crying or worried about my son or feeling alone or wondering how I was going to make ends meet, which was not all that often because I had a good job. I was college educated. I was an educator. That was the good thing because when I was divorced, I was able to carry on. But I spent a lot of money on therapies for my son and all sorts of play groups and people coming into the home. And so, like everybody else, you have to look at your budget. You're balancing your checkbook. I remember when I got my divorce, my family was whispering about it. Like on Brighton Beach Memoirs, or there's a scene where somebody has cancer and I'm laughing because the scene itself is quite funny. And Matthew Broderick was asking, why is everybody whispering cancer? Why are they saying the woman has cancer? That's how it was in my family with divorce. My mother would say, well, my daughter's divorced. Like, you couldn't say that out loud. And why does that have to be now the new label? My daughter's divorced. It didn't sit well with my family, but I had an autistic son. I was on my own. I was grateful for my career. I had the money that I needed to be able to do, not much of a savings account. I began seeing the trials, the tribulations, and the joys as different chapters. I ended one chapter. I was on to another one. Not a lot of people around me thought like that because they were so attached. And they think that now we're doing the same thing. We're holding on to those ideals. The object is to be happy, to find meaning, purpose. I'm going to tell you this last story. My great niece, my grandniece, I think either term is acceptable. Natalie, she's 6 years old. She told her father a few weeks ago that when she grows up, she wants to be like the Zias, okay? Myself and my niece are the Zias. That's how you say aunt in Italian. She said she wants to be like the Zias. She's 6 years old, and she already sees something in us. I'm 68. My niece is 35. We're both unmarried. We both have lives that we're creating, journeys that we're creating. We're not perfect. Our lives are not perfection, but we are happy and we are content and we are open-minded. She sees it at 6 years old. But that's what she told her father, not in those more high-level vocabulary words. But she said to him, I want to be like the Zias. They seem so happy. They don't have any problems. They don't have any kids. I guess she forgot that I do have a son. But my son is 31, so in her eyes, it's not a child. She says they don't have any kids. They can do whatever they want. They have great jobs. Zia Juliana is in the fashion industry. She likes that. She liked whatever that means to her. She likes that. She sees us as human beings at 6 years old. Is her assessment 100% on the money? No. But she sees at 6. And I'm glad for that. And her father is glad for that. And so is her mother. And they're in a traditional family. It's what works for them. It's all about what works for you. There are no rules. Be brave. Ladies my age, let's continue to remember, keep your minds open and let our daughters feel free to grow in the way they feel is for them. No more pressuring. Stand back. Celebrate when it's time to celebrate. But don't make a relationship the center of everyone's life. Probably an unpopular opinion. Be brave, girls. Strive to be who you are. I'm guaranteeing you, when you're authentic and comfortable in your own skin, you're going to attract the right partner for your life. Stand against the mama tide. And I'll see you next time here at the Wish House.